Hello, everybody. I'm John Geyer. I am co-chair of SciPy 2021, and I was delighted to welcome you all back for the second day of the conference. Just to go over a bit on today's schedule, we'll be starting this morning with our keynote talk from Professor Raychelle Burks from American University. And following that, then the second day of the SciPy Tools plenary talks. We'll have a short break and then transition into 4 tracks of technical talks in biology and neuroscience, computational science, social science, and digital humanities, the general track, and physics and astronomy. At 1:05 Central Time, then we'll have our diversity keynote luncheon talk by Dr. Teresa Tannenbaum. At 1:50, we'll return to the 4 technical tracks, same subjects as in the morning. And then at 3 p.m., the much-awaited second day of lightning talks. After lightning talks, we'll all transition to GatherTown as we did yesterday. And in GatherTown, at 4:10 p.m., we'll have 4 different BOF sessions, diversity success stories in open source, Python and finance, the challenges of gathering machine learning ready data, and Visual Studio Code for data scientists. The links for these, as yesterday, will, for the specific sessions and the specific GatherTown rooms, will be posted in the Slack channel, in the SciPy 2021 announcements channel as we get close to the time of. At 5:10 p.m., then we've got 3 networking sessions, again in GatherTown, on Let's Talk About Burnout, Future of Work, Is Remote the Answer? And Let's Talk About Burnout again. So I'm not sure what the networking sessions are. I'll have to pull up the schedule. I believe the schedule is more up to date than this one. As yesterday, the poster halls will be open. Posters are already there to go and browse at any time. We also have the videos from SciPy's past that you can go and see some notable talks that have been highlighted by folks that they wanted a chance to see again. I want to extend particular thanks to our gold sponsors. The SciPy sponsors for the meeting are what enable all of this to happen in providing support for the technical platforms that we need, and as well as financial support for many of our attendees. Please extend your thanks to our sponsors, and particularly for those that have desks set up in our general area. Please go have a chat with them about how you might engage or work with them. Lightning talks we've already saw the lovely chaos of lightning talks yesterday afternoon. There is a Google form sign up that's been posted to the Slack channel on SciPy 2021 announcements. So if you're interested in giving a lightning talk, please go and express your interest there for one of the remaining sessions this afternoon or tomorrow. If you're going to be sharing tweets or photos or anything on Twitter or Instagram, please be sure to tag your posts accordingly so that everyone can share those what you've seen. I want to reiterate the code of conduct. We want SciPy to be a safe and welcoming environment. And we expect everyone to comply with the code of conduct. If you find any inappropriate conduct while you're in AirMeet, you can click on the 3 dots next to a message in the chat and select report, and that will notify us, the conference organizers, about the issue, and we can follow up on it. You're also more than welcome to reach out to Corin Webster or I or Kristen Leiser or any member of the diversity committee if you have any specific concerns that you want to address that way. Similarly, in GatherTown, I'm not aware of any direct reporting mechanism, but you can certainly either message me if you see me in the GatherTown environment, or send messages to us offline about any concerns you might have. I do have to say we have received some reports that there were inappropriate drawings done on some of the whiteboards in the GatherTown spaces, and please put a stop to that sort of thing. This is a public and professional space, and we don't need any more of that. If you're interested in helping with SciPy 2022, which we are very much hoping will be a live or potentially hybrid event next year, then please sign up to volunteer for any of the following committees. Newcomers are quite welcome, and we have a big depth of field. People can help you get up to speed with how things work and what's expected. And we'll be having a BOF session tomorrow afternoon in GatherTown at 4:10 p.m. To specifically discuss planning for SciPy 2022. So I encourage you to join us there if you can. SciPy merchandise is still available for purchase until Sunday. If you go to the SciPy 2021 website, you can buy both t-shirts and stickers. And now I would like to welcome our keynote speaker, Dr. Raychelle Burks. I first became acquainted with Professor Burks via the documentary Picture a Scientist, which was selected for the Tribeca Film Festival last year. If you haven't seen it, and I strongly encourage you to seek it out, it's a devastating and personal look at the challenges faced by women scientists. I found it quite powerful. Dr. Burks started her early career as a chemist, working in a crime laboratory and developing a lot of hands-on expertise in forensics. She then returned to academia as an analytical chemist, again focused on forensics, first at St. Edward's University in Austin, and then subsequently has now moved to American University, just a few blocks from where I'm speaking right now. Her group is substantially focused on developing detection methods for a diverse range of compounds that primarily have forensic and national security applications. She works in colorimetric and luminescent sensor arrays, accompanying image and chemometric analysis for those arrays, and a particular emphasis on low-cost and reliable rapid screening methods to make these analytical techniques as widely available as possible. She's co-creator of the Digital Imaging and Vision Applications in Science, or DIVAS project, which empowers natural science majors to engage in authentic computational problems, which fits in well, I think, with her broad emphasis on diverse, equitable, inclusive STEM education, and particularly integrating programming into her curricula at an undergraduate level to get people doing real science at the earliest stage as possible. She's a noted popular science communicator. She was a regular on the Smithsonian's channel shows The Curious Life and Death of. She writes a Science Meets True Crime column called Trace Analysis for Chemistry World. And in 2020, the American Chemical Society awarded her the Grady Stack Award for interpreting chemistry for the public. Please join me in welcoming Raychelle Burks.
Thank you so much. What a great introduction. Now, and no pressure, now I have to live up to that. So yeah, feeling the pressure. I always get so nervous, no matter how many times that I give talks. So I'll do the normal thing. Hopefully you can hear me and you can see my slides. Awesome, now that that's out of the way. So thank you again. My name is Raychelle Burks, and I'm at American University. American University is in Washington, D.C. This is the traditional territory of the Nacotchitane and Anacostan people. And American University, like America itself, has been significantly influenced by slavery. If we have an accurate telling of history, it better equips us for the present and, of course, for the future. So I'm excited to talk to you today about community, computing, and chemistry. And really, you'll notice that I put community first, right? And that's really going to be a big focus of my talk, is that by putting community first, by putting us first, this can lead to tremendous success in both education, research, development, technology, so many benefits, right? So why put community first? Why put, people first? Well, people are at the center of what we do. And it's not just me saying this, the NSF said it. At least that's how I interpret this report, because there we are in the middle of this big report, right? People at the center of what we do. And if anyone, I'm sure all of us here have written a proposal, right? Or some kind of a pitch, or just trying to explain our work to anyone, we typically are doing it, right, to help people or to help the world of which we reside in. Right. And in fact, look at the title of this, the boldness of it, transforming the world through science. Right. We are exceptionally good at these bold visionary goals. Right. And these lofty aspirations. Right. We want to know more. We want to do more. We want to solve the biggest challenges. If you read this report and ones that go back decades and decades, about transforming a world, about solving the world's biggest challenges and problems and making these big gains, you'll see that we want to tackle things like world hunger. We want to solve health disparities and poverty, right? And we want to deal with things like climate change and huge environmental issues. In my field, so I'm a forensic scientist, we have this, of course, by definition, it's literally the application of science to the law in the pursuit of justice, right? So we scientists, we people that do this thing, we just have these big dreams, right? To help each other and just, again, to transform the world, right? And we are the ones that do science. Science is a human endeavor, right? And science, as we definitely know here, is a team endeavor, right? And I'm part of many teams, luckily, people that have expertises I don't have. And that just makes the team stronger, as we've seen, right, in a lot of presentations at this meeting thus far. So at AU, I work with fantastic colleagues across several colleges. And then again, within the SciPy community, you just have this dizzying array of expertise across the entire STEM corridor, and bringing in digital humanities just makes that even more robust. And then I bet you each of us can name conservatively 5 teams that we're a part of in some direct or indirect way, right? And what we know about collaborative work, like collaborative living, and I love this quote from the National Research Council, is it requires us to understand the individuality and uniqueness of those around us, to value those differences, as well as to learn from one another in an atmosphere of positive encouragement and mutual respect. Right? That is a beautiful concept. And sometimes, let's be honest, we fall short of that, right? And there's significant data that shows that for a long time, today, right, included, is that the historically marginalized continue to be marginalized, right? And our workplaces are not as inclusive and equitable as they really need to be, simply because it's the right thing to do and because our workplaces impact our work. Right? Science exists in a cultural context, and I've definitely said this before, is that, the workers impact the workplace and the work. And we know that. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, right? And science, of course, because it includes all of us, it includes all of our brilliance. And let's face it, we're pretty smart, right? And I've seen just in this conference so far, just mind-blowing work, right? But also what we bring to that is also our bias. And we need to know that, right? And again, it affects our workplace as we've seen, hopefully, but it also impacts our work, as scholarship shows. We have these two great books by Anjali and Sinai, Inferior, about the role of sexism and how that's really impacted science and the use of that science in medicine, in technology, right? And then, of course, race science and the reemergence of that and the role of white supremacy and how that is impacting science. And then, of course, all the policies and procedures after that. And of course, within computing and those allied fields, we can see that it continues with David Benjamin's Race After Technology and Algorithms of Oppression. We can see that that is continuing, and we need to be diligent about that. And then, of course, just in the general scheme of exploration and the scientific endeavor, this great book by Chana Prescott Weinstein about how all of these things that I've just talked about will impact just the most basic research and discovery, right? So again, all of this focus on people is important because the people are the workers that do science and impacts the work, right? So if we want better work, we need to be better workers. We need to think about these things really, really critically. And we are. There are so many organizations. I mean, just in the information that John shared this morning is we have a code of conduct and how we're going to treat each other as a community and what's acceptable and what's not. And let's really strive for this excellence, right? And a lot of these groups are doing this. And this is just the tip of the iceberg in groups that are trying to make our workplaces, which includes everything from field stations to classrooms to labs to computer hubs to, everything, right? And these are just some of the groups, right? I've worked with many of these groups. I'm a member of many of these groups. I'm on committees and task force and things. So, and I'm sure all of us here are, or a lot of us are doing this type of work because this type of work, again, it's about making the work better, the workplace better. Right? And SciPy is doing that, right? Our community, right? There's circles of community that are all kind of intersecting each other. Really excited to see this great work. Of course, with the technical prowess, also is the prowess in thinking about how, again, we're dealing with the workplace, right? So excited to see things like fairness in systems and AI. This is just a sampling, but there's some really exciting talks today and kind of hangouts that I'm really excited. And I hope that you will be joining us in these talks, right? To really, again, make it better, right? And be data driven in all of our pursuits in the workplace, right? And knowing how it impacts our work. And I know just from the talks that I've been to and exposure to this community is we want to do better, right? You're tinkering with code, you're changing one thing. And as analytical person, we will just work ourselves to the bone to just increase by a small amount because we know that increasing by a small amount, right? And you do the work diligently a little bit each time, it can make big gains, right? So I'm excited to see that and that those things are cooking, right? And so that's what I think about. I think of all of that, the workers, the workplace, the work, right? Because I'm definitely, as an analytical person, I am about the process, but I'm also about the output, right? And I want to do good work. And I want to have a workplace that really encourages that and is a healthy and vital workplace, right? So I want to be a better teacher, a better mentor. I want to, of course, do, again, better work, right? And I want to be a better collaborator because, again, many of us are working in teams and teams within teams and all of that environment. And I think one project that I work on really kind of summarizes not only looking at the work and the workers and thinking about community is a project that John mentioned very early on, which is our DIVAS work, right? So DIVAS, again, stands for Digital Imaging Vision Applications in Science. It was an NSF supported grant. We've got a new application in to expand it out, fingers crossed, because our first iteration was a pilot project. And we use images, right? Image analysis, media computation to really hook students in at the undergraduate level to help build their coding and computational skills. And primarily, these are our natural sciences majors. And we do all of this within what's called the community of practice. So I work with amazing collaborators, Dr. Tessa Durham Brooks, biologist, Dr. Erin Doyle, another biologist, Dr. Mark Meisenberg, computer scientist, and Dr. Tim Frey, education. And let me say, none of our research has anything in common. I'm a forensic scientist. All the biologists are trying to keep things alive. And as a forensic person, that's usually not my concern. So we have very different research in the bench area. And then, of course, Mark is working on some really exciting computer science projects and computer science education. We don't have a lot of research things in common, but what we did have in common is that it turns out that we were all doing image analysis and then the resulting statistical analysis and visualizations. And then we were all trying to come up with better ways to train and educate our students to support our research efforts and to also give them the skills, the transferable skills they were going to go and need to be successful in graduate school and the workforce, whatever they wanted to do next, right? And that's really our unifying feature, is this kind of approach to computation. So why did we choose a community of practice, and what is a community of practice? It turns out, by the way, we're in a community of practice right now. It's a supportive community for sharing, developing, and maintaining knowledge and skills and practices. And the membership ranges in expertise from novices, right? People who are just learning, taking maybe those tutorials and learning about things, and like myself, trying to keep track of all the new changes and all the libraries and things like that. And it's got that range, right? It's got this big range, but again, the key word there, second word, supportive community, right, of learners. And why is the benefit of working in this kind of community? Well, we see boasts in academic performance, self-efficacy, sense of belonging, STEM identity, and those top four lead to gains in retention in STEM, which is a significant issue that we've been working on for a long time, and graduation rates, right? And these are all good and great things. Now, why did we choose Python, right, in DIVAS? Because, there were other options. Well, of course, because Python is the most stylish. No, no, it's not because it's the most stylish. I saw this tweet and I couldn't resist. It's because it's everywhere. As again, I've seen in this conference and we're seeing in a lot of places, right? It's open, limitless applications, eminently learnable, collaborative growth mindset. And all of this just feeds into what we're trying to achieve in this community of practice to help boost these skills. Right? So what do we do in DIVAS? Well, DIVAS is about a 2-year commitment for the undergrads, although most of them end up staying in our research labs for longer than that. It kicks off with an introductory seminar to just get their feet wet in computation and Python, and you're getting set up on Anaconda and learning to, use the virtual machine and, Juniper and, what's a panda and it's not a cute animal, like all this kind of really, really intro stuff, but also to get a touch of what do we mean by media computation and image analysis, just to kind of get a little bit of a survey course to get their feet wet, get them interested in the kind of awesome applications that you can do with this type of work. And then in summers, when we really get down to the nitty gritty, we kick it off the summer session with a coding workshop. 2 days of kind of, it doesn't sound like enough, but 2 days of Python, and then 3 days of using Python for image analysis to really get in there. And they're working again on authentic problems during this whole kind of workshop to get up there. Then they go into a pair programming session, because again, we have a kind of a team science approach, which is a standard kind of computational education scheme. And they're working again on some really fun research projects and big kind of grand challenges across the whole team. And they meet every week, and we've got a Slack channel for DIVAS, and they're helping each other, and the teams are working together, right? And then from there, they transition into our research groups, independent research, working on a range of topics that I'll touch on just a few today. And then in spring, it's kind of a chance for them to kind of clean up some code, write up some things, do some presentations, and also provide us great feedback and help determine, okay, what's the next round going to look like, right? And again, many of them continue on in our research group. It's not just an online or a community. We do a lot of online virtual work, but we also do in-person, so it's hybrid, right? And DIVAS, again, is now, it's 5 years. Since its inception and creation and funding would have been 3 years. So we've been working on this for a very long time. And so I just want to highlight a bit of the independent research. Now, there's too many to go over here, and I'm actually going to be forced to stop talking soon. So I can't go over all the projects, but there's things like real-time reaction monitoring. There's projects, osteological x-rays to look at how bones are breaking and in which directions, and to try to map them, and using image analysis for that to examine wound healing, right? So there's this variety of applications. And then the ones that I kind of want to highlight are a few that I'm either directly involved in, and then of course one of from our PI, our collaborator, Dr. Tessa Durham-Brooks. So one of the big ones that that my lab was involved in is, again, because we're a forensic scientist, is we worked on what's called a CBRNE reconnaissance kit. So that's chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear weapons or threats and explosives. And so designing a test for that, right? And some kind of a testing kit for that. And we had a lot of constraints in that project because if you think about the typical gear, you really couldn't add any additional weight to that. They're already carrying somewhere anywhere between 60 and 120 pounds. So really had to think about that, had to think about it needs to be either a no energy to a low energy requirement. They're not going to be carrying any additional batteries or power sources. And again, we were mindful of costs because the typical per unit usage is analytical chemists. And also that the person using the testing kit is not going to be a PhD chemist, right? They are going to be someone that receives training to do the kit, to use the kit, but they are probably not going to be a scientist in any stage of career, right? So that's not their primary responsibility. So taking all that on board, my group does a lot of work with kind of paper-based testing arrays, like testing strips. But we also accompany those with image analysis and chemometrics using Python that helps us design even more and more discriminating tests, not only because we can refine and pick down to the sensors that are going to be the most selective for an application, but we have a new collaboration with the Center for Computer Assisted Synthesis, and we're working towards using all the data to actually drive synthesis to design sensors that are even better, right? So we do all of this work, and remember, all this work is done by undergraduates, so they're learning how to do every stage from the bench chemistry to the fabrication of the paper-based arrays, which really do look like that picture dead center. And they tend to be just about 1.5 centimeters in diameter. And then they're looking about image analysis, which we use a lot of portable devices for, like somebody would have perhaps a dedicated smartphone. So we use those a lot. And we also use tablets. And so then doing all of the computation and refinement. So that's a big project that we worked on. It's in phase 3. Testing requirements, so it's considered a successful completion. So that's one of our kind of a bigger success stories. And so we have actually came up with kind of, again, a single-use portable testing strip for that. Another great project is Dr. Tessa Durham-Brooks, and we're helping out a bit with this one, coming up with a colorimetric sensor to really look at these root exudates, right? These chemicals that are being excreted from roots in the rhizosphere. What's going on there? What are they being used for? What are they communicating? What does it reveal about the plant and its growth cycle and all of this other cool biological stuff that I don't know anything about, but what I do know about again is image analysis and coming up, again, picking the right kind of chemical sensor for these exudates. So some really cool work going on there. Another project that my lab is involved in, which was a big departure for us because, again, we tend to do a lot of forensic type work like the CBRNE kits, is coming up for an array, a sensor array, for a colleague at University of Michigan, Dr. Anna Mapp, who wanted to do what's called a high throughput screen, right, of this GAC modality in this protein that's involved in her lab is pretty solid on its involvement in leukemia. We want to go through a level of inhibitors that could potentially have some type of clinical treatment, several stages down, and screening them as rapidly as possible. And these particular GAC modality, it actually is quite, quote, fuzzy. it changes structures very much. And so we picked a particular set of sensors and refinement that actually how the structure of this parent protein changes gives you a different response, and what that response reveals about the attachment of these inhibitors. So working on that's been really exciting. We're also kind of transitioning into array differential scanning for perimetry. So that's a completely different application that our students, are being involved in. Had a student to go do an REU at the lab to work directly there, and is now a graduate student at the University of Michigan. So our DIVAS scholars are doing some really, really cool stuff. I want to highlight one project in particular because it's one I worked on, our students worked on, but also I call it our CSI project, right? Again, you can take the analytical chemists out of the crime lab, but you can never take the crime lab out of the analytical chemists. So the one project that I worked on, I also think it really, really highlights, again, the kind of work that our students are doing within this community and this great output, is we worked on processing prints. So the processing of latent prints, so if you were to look down at your hand, ridge detail, unless you are one of those very rare folks that don't have any ridge detail, but you have ridge detail, right? And so if you were to put your hand down on a surface, non-porous surface, you would probably leave behind some level of ridge detail, right? We would call those latent prints, and they have to be developed, right? And we've been doing that kind of in the criminal court system globally for, 130 years. But the history of prints goes back, and their use for, kind of identification purposes goes back thousands of years, right? So we've been doing it for 130 years. And even with the advent of forensic DNA analysis, latent prints and the comparison work is still the number one way to identify or point to a person of interest, right? So it's a very active area of research because of this preeminence and because of this continued heavy use and reliance, right? Compared to DNA analysis, it's incredibly inexpensive to do the comparison in technical aspects in comparison to it. And again, it's just been around a significantly amount longer, right? And so if we think about one of the most popular ways to process prints, and maybe somebody here has seen it or done it, it's cyanoacrylate fuming or superglue fuming. So if you look at this great image from Minnesota BCA, it's Bureau of Criminal Investigations, is that you look at this and you say, okay, I don't see prints, but you expose it to superglue. It's very easy setup to do. You can superglue fume at home just in case your roommate's stealing your leftovers. Happy to tell you how to do that. And you'll get these fantastic developed prints, this white polymer coating that does several things, right? It highlights, develops the print, so now they're patent, they're easy to see, but also it fixes the print in place because you've literally superglued the print onto the surface, right? So it kind of preserves it and fixes it. Now, it has a lot of positive benefits. It's become one of the number one processing technique for non-porous surfaces. Right? It has a lot of benefits. Okay, so a drawback is if you're trying to find it on white and say other colored surfaces, these multicolored surfaces, it's incredibly difficult, right, to do that. And I've processed a whole car, and let me tell you, it is incredibly difficult to find white on white, or white on, if anyone has like one of those silver MacBook Pros or silver, those kind of like light silver gray phones, incredibly difficult, right? So you've processed it, you've fixed it, you thought you were going to see it, you're not going to see it, or you're going to see part of it because it's on a multicolored surface. That means that you're going to have to do another processing step, right? Maybe. Right. So if you could do a secondary stain, well, that's a second step, right? And that means that you're adding more processing time. You might think a couple minutes doesn't make a huge difference, but day one, I was told when I got to the crime lab, I was already 6 months behind. So it makes a huge thing. Anytime you can save a few minutes, as we know in processing in how to run code, but also in actual analytical time, it means you can get more runs in. And in a crime lab, when you're trying to get through casework, it's really, really key, right? Now, they came up with vapor phase stain. So we can stain and we can vapor all in one go. Well, fantastic. That sounds like a great idea. Well, there's literally two that are commercially available, and they're actually pretty costly, right? And we think about, this is the #1 technique worldwide. You might be processing thousands of items of evidence a week, if not more, depending on how many cases, how big the kind of jurisdiction of the lab is, right? So we thought we would tackle vapor phase stains because we didn't want to introduce any additional time from the second step, but we thought there was some refinement here. So my students that were working on this project, they really focused on that. Now you might be saying, why are there only 2, right? This seems like this should be something that there should be more options. Well, it's actually pretty tricky because you have to have something that is going to supplement, some kind of a stain that's going to supplement at this workable temperature that you have for CA, right? It's got to be less than 200 degrees C. It usually, based on the literature available for this type of processing, usually around 120 degrees, because you also want to have it be it's heat accelerated so that you can, again, get through a certain amount of casework, right? So that's one big requirement. It's going to eliminate a huge number of options, right? The other big thing is it has to only preferentially stain CA, right? You don't want it to stain the background, which a lot of, again, that is going to eliminate a huge amount, because, you know, one thing to always keep in the forefront is how we do latent print examinations, is that you have to have high contrast, right? So when you're staining something, you're literally physically matching morphology and looking at particular patterns and directions, right? And there's always a human eye that's doing this and picking out points, even for, you know, computational comparison filtering, say through, you know, APHIS, which has now been subsumed on the next generation identification system. When you're doing work like this, and you can see that it is imperative that, again, it only stains the CA, and it stains as much as possible, right? Because of the type of work that you're doing. And the application of it, which would be identify, and really it's more correct to say to alert to the possibility of a person of interest, right? So this really eliminates a huge number of candidates. And then we decided, because why not, is we wanted to make it more difficult by adding additional constraints to keep the costs low. Is we only wanted to be able to use an elementary superglue fuming setup, no extra expensive equipment, something that's already standard to use or easy to set up. Only using a simple handheld light that often can be battery powered, no super expensive alternative light source, so that really eliminated our excitation wavelength to 254 and 365. And no special camera with specialty filters, because that's just money, money, money. I can hear the cash register in my head, right? So we wanted to make it affordable so it can be maximally accessible, right, for a number of jurisdictions and forensic applications. So we worked with that, and looking at the 2 commercially available ones, we came up with some good candidates, and based on my own professional experience. And one of them is salicylic acid, which many of you might have on your face right now. I know I do. It's in my moisturizer. It's the agent that's often added to kind of combat acne, right? That's its major selling point. But the other reason I knew it as a forensic scientist is salicylic acid is a hydrolysis product of aspirin. And aspirin is a cutting agent to many street drugs, you know, quote, street drugs, scheduled drugs by the Drug Enforcement Agency, like cocaine and fentanyl. It's a dilutant. And so one way you can tell if it's there is you pass a black light over it and it glows blue, right? So I said, hey, let's try that one, right? Then doing some literature searches, my students were saying, okay, well, there's this other one that's structurally related that, you know, people who study C. elegans know, because it's literally called death fluorescence. When they start making this, the glow, there's a blue glow to the worms that they can measure. And also sublimation temperature, these are like right in our range. And then here's where hashtag overly honest methods come in. And we literally just went to the stock room and found other ones that were structurally similar to keep ourselves on budget. And then, of course, we went with the parent acid, and we evaluated all of these. And I don't have time to go through all of that. But what we found is these 2, which we thought would work in the first place, absolutely did work. They met our 2 requirements, which were really big hills to kind of climb. And what we saw is this great development of prints. And what my students did, again, through their DIVAS training and Python training, is they came up with image analysis technique, because we were monitoring this over time. So they tracked the fluorescence over time, and they decided they had to explore global thresholding versus adaptive thresholding. We settled on adaptive. for a variety of great reasons. And then, tracking this again over time to see how the fluorescence is changing, because you have to document items of evidence, but there might be a delay in the review because the casework is so massive. And so we tracked it for several weeks based on that kind of information. And we saw some, that it was pretty much statistically the same. When we did our statistical analysis, we were like, okay, so it's pretty stable over this unit of time. And so we did all of that, those visualizations. All of this code was created by students, the analysis and the visualization. And this is the team, and this is the paper that they wrote, right? We wrote this paper together. It's got the team of students that worked on it, and they're DIVAS scholars. And we got this great publication just this February in the top journal in forensic science, which is the Journal of Forensic Science. I couldn't be happier for the students, this great output, right? So that was a DIVAS project, right? And they learned how to do it. It was minimally funded by the project. And again, writing it up and doing all of that work to get it out. And so what are the other DIVAS outcomes? Well, of course, right away, I just highlighted a few of the programs, but there were numerous presentations with many student awards. They did a great job in their presentations, and many publications. And this work is highlighted in our recent May publication on the DIVAS project, that there was just so many positive student outcomes, productivity-wise, in the work. Right. But other great, and I think more important outcomes is we saw promising growth in participant self-efficacy in computing. And again, as the projects got more difficult, that self-efficacy was maintained, which we thought was really, really exciting. There was significant growth in key computational skills. I hope I've highlighted the variety of projects and just the skill that would be required chemically and computationally to do that kind of work. And this is a great one. 94% of DIVAS scholars were retained for the duration of the program, right? And remember, we're always looking about how do we supportive environment to retain these scholars to get, to maintain the best, right, in our fields. And 100% of the scholars remain in STEM major 1 year after completing the 2-year program, right? So we thought those are really, really great impact and effects. And what I think this shares, told us, and I hope maybe convinces you a little bit, is that when we focus on the workplace, we get great work. And when we really make it about community and about the people, the work follows, right? And that we're going to get fantastic outputs when it comes to computing and chemistry. Thank you so much. It was a delight speaking with you today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much, Raychelle. That was really a fantastic talk. Thoroughly enjoyed really the whole perspective that you bring to things, and both the specifics of the work and the general approach to how you engage with students. Really inspirational. I see at least, we've got a couple of questions now. So sorry, I can't read this blue on gray here. All right, show on stage. Yeah. So the first question we have is DIVAS affiliated with REU?
It is not. It is funded under the NSF-IU, so Improving Undergraduate Education, but it's not under the Research Experience for Undergrad Corridor. So this did provide us, it is very REU-like, I do want to say that, in that, that significant summer commitment, right, of 8 to 10 weeks. But it isn't actually officially funded under that.
Okay. And which numerical libraries of Python did you use?
The SciPy. So we used, oh my God, my mind just went completely blank. NumPy, Matplotlib, all of the standard kind of numerical ones. We actually set this up for the students. Mark Meisenberg, who's our CS guru and Python ninja, sets all of the computers up with all of the software and packages, Anaconda and Python, all the interfaces, all the libraries are imported in, so that when we hand it to the students, they are ready to go. And there's no kind of downtime, and GitHub and all of these things. But part of our coding workshop in the beginning is actually getting them familiar with those platforms and usability. And then over the course of the whole summer, we're getting more familiar with the libraries, how they're maintained, who's contributing to them, how to utilize them, all of that kind of thing.
That's great. That's great. Do you incorporate parts of the carpentries or any related curricula in terms of how you bring people up to speed?
Yes, and I do want to encourage folks to check out the PLAS paper, if only because it has a link to all of this. Our image analysis workshop and our Python workshop was modeled on the software carpentries, and in fact, software carpentries adopted our image analysis, and it's now available on their separate platform. Everything's on GitHub, but if you even just Google Doan DIVAS, but go to our PLAS website, links back to it, and we have all of that freely available in addition to our computational thinking rubric to assess kind of self-efficacy and how folks are doing over the duration, the images. I mean, the whole kit and caboodle is openly available for the community.
That's great. That's great. Let's see. Here's one. How much programming experience do the students have when they start?
A lot of them start with absolutely zero. Most of our students, right, have no programming. They're biology majors and chemistry majors, not bioinformatics. So they are starting, some of them, their only experience with computers is making really funny TikToks and maybe opening a Word document, right? And so that's great. And actually, it's been really fun because what we've noticed too, is I'm a little bit of a gamer, is our gamer students who don't feel like they have any computational strengths, they really understand the process and how to build and how to advance. And so, but yeah, most of our students are actually first year and they come in with no programming experience.
That's great. Along those lines, you'd mentioned that you introduced them to pair programming. Do you get resistance to that, or they maybe are potentially more open to it since they don't come from a more traditional programming background?
They're very open to it. And even, okay, so I know the resistance is anecdotal, but there were a few CS majors, but because of where we teach and the undergraduate curriculum does have a pair programming focus, at the institutions we were at, we didn't have maybe some of that potential resistance, although we're aware of that in the literature. But the fact that I think what surprised the students is how team and collaborative programming was, because maybe the stereotype is lone like very, they like that. And also a lot of the times they're sitting side by side, and there can be a lot of quiet time or virtual, a lot of time too, virtual logging in, but it's more about, oh, what's that? Or I think it'd be better. It can be very active, but I think again, that having that sense of self-check and feedback for a lot of our science majors, right? That was a normal part of what their experience as a lab partner in our undergraduate bio and gen chem classes. And they really like that collaborative team approach, but you did have a variety. We were aware of, there's introverts and there's extroverts, and pairing up the teams and kind of making all of that work. And that's why in a community, you've got to talk about, work styles and things like that and work out all of those issues.
Great. If you had a magic wand, what would you change to make what you do easier? And there was a related one. Is there anything that our open source projects can do to make your students even more successful?
Oh, gosh. I'm looking forward to them being more involved. Well, I would say my magic wand would be like, because we have a new proposal in with NSF, would be like, fund it. Because then we can go up, because our pilot project was just about 20 scholars. We could go up to 100 across 6 universities, including University of District Columbia, which is a historically Black college and university, University of Michigan. And so that would be kind of my magic wand, because then we could get this even, bigger group, bigger community. But I think what we're planning to weave more into is more engagement with the SciPy community. And of course, half of our project was during this global pandemic. So that's like all of us, we've had to make some adjustments. But funding is always, was a significant investment, monetarily for our students to fund, funding for 2 years. So that would be kind of my biggest thing. But the gains, I think it was worth it because of the gains we saw.
That's great. So this one actually, I'm personally intrigued by this. Does the existence of programs like DIVAS and the software carpentry indicate a lack of needed support in university curricula? And if so, how should we handle that larger problem? I will note I was just approached by the materials department at the University of Maryland to teach their first year's Python this coming fall, and I applaud them. I'm intimidated by it, but I applaud them for actually focusing the energy, because I know finding the time in an academic curriculum to incorporate new material is always a challenge. And I'm glad they're focusing on it.
Our degree plans are jam-packed. And, when you get a bachelor's of science in chemistry, when you think about just, you're covering general, foundational, organic, physical, biochemical, analytical. I mean, this is a huge packed curriculum. So what DIVAS is trying to do is to not make it separate, right? It's to integrate it, kind of a little bit like bioinformatics, right? Which tends, at least some of the schools, can be Python, can be a bit R, can be a bit mixed, right? And so it's jam-packed. It's not really, I don't know if I want to say a lack of support, but when we get degree programs certified and certain curriculum, it can be really hard to figure out where you're going to weave this in, this type of thing. And if you make an additional course requirement, is that fair to the students, like degree wise, and pay for it and time scale, and how many sections are you going to have available? I mean, there's so many parts in that, but that's why we tried to weave it into an REU type program, so that we could financially support the students over the summer, get them that research experience that always makes them so marketable on the job and graduate school front, but get that in, and heavy recruiting to that first year can really set them up for that success. Now, of course, a great thing would be, well, what if we just had internal funding to have that kind of program and really financially support it? Wish we did. That would be another magic wand, right?
Right. Let's see. You're jumping around on me. Is the DIVAS program targeted to underrepresented communities?
It is a priority that we do want to be maximally inclusive to communities that, quite honestly, were barred for a significant amount of time and continue to be so in implicit and explicit ways, especially from computational spaces. So we are very, very aggressive in our recruiting. And something that I didn't put up on the slide, but 76% of our DIVAS scholars were people that identified as women, and 14% identified as an underrepresented minority. We have more ambitious goals on our intersectional identities in the second round, because we know that it's what we need to do. And again, we're seeing real gains.
That's great. You touched on the magic wand. More specifically, anything that we can do that would help?
Ooh, gosh. I'm not, and forgive my ignorance here, I'm not sure what kind of dedicated undergraduate programming is available through SciPy, like at the meeting level. I know SOCNAS, Society for the Advancement of Chicanos, Native Americans in STEM, and ACS, American Chemical Society, has really like dedicated things for undergraduate researchers and undergraduate educators, dedicated kind of tracks and programming. I'm not sure if that's on the SciPy agenda. I didn't quite see that this year, but that would be a great meeting space and educational tools. And I know that there's some great stuff out there for education in Python and SciPy. I mean, really, really top. And so maybe I've just volunteered myself to organize a symposium for that, because that just, again, getting the community together to trade these which is what SciPy is really great at, is that open trading of information, whether it's, we have a lot of resources to share with each other, tips and tricks, but having kind of that space for students and educators.
Yeah. In traditional times at the in-person meetings, there's what's called the teen track. So that's bringing in high school students and introducing them to different ways that Python is used in different disciplines. Sort of what the tools are and how it's used, and just introducing them to what science really is, as opposed to the very sanitized and abstract version you get taught in high school. In terms of specifically geared toward undergraduates, I'm not thinking of anything. We have a lot of affiliation with the carpentries. That tends to be more graduate and postgraduate in its emphasis. So yeah, no, I think we're looking forward to the program you put together next year.
Yeah. And I think part of the thing too is when undergraduate researchers, a significant part is that every week during the summer, they do our stand-up, it's not really, we're all sitting down, but our meetings to kind of say, hey, here's how we're at so far, given they all require to give feedback, constructive feedback and kudos, right? Micro affirmations, but having that at a national scale, getting that input, having a chance to communicate, it makes us better researchers. Right. And so I think it would be just a play. And because sometimes I'm sure that you're familiar with this, if a more senior person in career, they often get selected to speak. And so just even having a track for or a lightning round, for undergraduates. Oh, my gosh. Am I just adding to my service load? It would be great.
Great. Could you say a little more about the role pair programming plays in DIVAS?
Yeah, so the paired programming part is a good 4 weeks of the program. So they come off of the 1 week workshop / boot camp and they go right in. And these are the same students that have all been in kind of the bigger group. And then they get paired off and they start working on, we have kind of quote these grand challenges, usually 2 big projects. They work on one for 2 weeks, one for the other, and they're all working on it. And we tend to select out teams that will be a mix of majors and disciplines and skill sets and these things. And even though they're all working on, the same project, they really come at it from some different angles. But it's a significant part of our project because then they might move on after that to the 4 weeks of working into one of our research labs, which they then usually continue on through the next academic year. But it's that's about half, right, of our project to really get them up to speed. And that's also where a lot of the gains, the workshop, there's a steep learning curve, but the complexity of the problems in that paired programming and the kind of how to get in the scheme of that kind of working order, that's where they're getting a lot of the meat of the project. So it really plays a significant role.
Great. So I'm going to take, and we've had one just popped in. So this question actually came in very early on, and I both wasn't sure exactly what it was asking, but it also seemed kind of open-ended. How do you find these projects to work on? Sorry if I missed this. So I'm not sure whether this is specifically looking at the forensic projects that you're working on,
or just maybe all of the
or things like DIVAS, or more broadly. So tackle it any way that makes sense.
Yeah. So, we've got a great PI team. Again, literally none of us work on the same stuff. And that's the beauty of it, is that means that really our nexus, right, the place where we intersect is image analysis and statistical analysis and visualizations. But the directions we take to get there, don't ask me about corn, right? And I'm a corn husker. I don't know. But then I work on, a range of things. And then Erin's working on, she's a bioinformatics person, completely different than Tessa, who's really plant pathology, completely different. So that's part of it. But then each one of those PIs, like myself, have 3 or 4 collaborators that we've got to put student projects on. So, conservatively speaking, during a summer, you're going to have a good half a dozen very different projects students are working on. And I'd say, we've had dozens of different projects in these years, of different durations and lengths. And so it's really about the community, what the community has needed. It's another big reason why having an expansive community leads to expansive challenges that we can have our students work on.
Great. And I think this will be our last question. We're almost to the hour. Do you try to encourage contribution to open source in DIVAS, or is that not a focus right now?
No, it's absolutely a focus. We take, so we give, right? Everybody maintains a Git repo. We have a group one that we maintain. All of our stuff is openly available. And we're always properly citing because we're taking resources as well. So yeah, we've contributed again to software carpentry and our PLOS paper. All of those resources are available. And I will also say that for our Journal of Forensic Science paper, we have a complete digital repository of every image. The code is available in our supplemental information. It is all out there because we know that if you take, you give.
That's fantastic. That is absolutely fantastic. So we have now reached the hour, and please join me in thanking Raychelle. This was a fantastic keynote. I really thoroughly enjoyed it, and thank you all for a series of great questions. We will be breaking for a few minutes and then kicking off at 5 after the hour with the SciPy Tools plenary session, continuing from yesterday.
Thank you, everyone.